The AI boom has created a dangerous illusion. Most people think Nvidia is the company at the center of it all. They're wrong. Here, 50 miles from the North Korean border, sits a cluster of factories you've never seen on the news. Two companies produce the one component without which the entire AI industry collapses. It's called HBM, High Bandwidth Memory. Remove it, and Nvidia cannot build a single advanced AI chip. Over the last 18 months, that dependence has transformed South Korea into a cash machine. It has fueled a stock market boom, created some of the most sought-after jobs in the world, triggered political battles, and turned a small corner of the planet into one of the most strategic places on Earth. Yet, outside Asia, almost nobody is talking about it. Now tell me, what happens if something goes wrong? What will be the impact on the global economy, and what's the backup plan if it happens? While Western media are busy talking about Nvidia's stock price, I cover what you don't see on TV. Every week, we break down how business in Asia actually works from the inside. If that's the kind of stuff that you want in your feed, hit subscribe. Look at this. You're standing in the middle of nowhere in the western half of South Korea. If you drive south, you reach the main SK Hynix campus. You drive north in the other direction and you reach Samsung's biggest semiconductor complex. That's it. That little stretch of road is where most of the world's AI memory gets made. Roughly 9 out of every 10 HBM chips that are produced globally come from one of these two clusters. I know, when you hear memory chip, your brain probably files this under boring engineering stuff. But stay with me, because the boring part is exactly what makes it interesting. For decades, memory was a low-margin business. Nobody really cared, and most companies survive on volume. Then AI showed up, and it turned out that the brain of every modern AI chip needs to be sitting millimeters away from a very specific kind of memory running at insane speeds. And it's stupidly hard to make. So hard that out of every chip manufacturer on Earth, only 3 companies have figured out how to do it at scale. SK Hynix makes roughly 53% of the production, Samsung 35%, and Micron, the only non-Korean player, makes the remaining 11%. Right now, SK Hynix has sold out its entire HBM production for 2026. Almost all the 2027 production capacity is already sold. When a company tells you it has already sold everything it can make 18 months before it makes it, that's a chokehold. Now your instinct is probably the same one I had. If this stuff is so critical, surely there's a plan B. Well, not really. The harsh reality is that a backup plan cannot be created overnight. A memory fab that can produce HBM at this level costs well over $10 billion and takes around 5 years from breaking ground to delivering a usable chip. The new lines Samsung and SK Hynix are scrambling to build won't fully ramp until 2028, which means if anything happens to those 2 Korean clusters tomorrow, there's no backup plan. The world will simply have to wait for years. The shortage is so severe now that Nvidia has cut production of its own consumer gaming GPUs by 30 to 40%, sacrificing one product line just to keep its AI chips moving. Prices for high-speed computer memory have roughly tripled in the last few months. At Statrys, we work with entrepreneurs whose businesses run straight through Asian supply chains. One of our clients put it to me simply. He said his entire production schedule, his cost for the year, all of it now depends on what 2 Korean companies decide to prioritize. He's not even in the chip business. He just builds products that need memory in them and is completely at their mercy. That's the part that should make you wake up. It's not only Nvidia that's exposed, it's everyone standing behind Nvidia in the line. When a choke point that critical sits inside one country, capital notices fast. Over the last 18 months, it's been pouring into Korea at a speed the country hasn't seen in modern history. Korea has a stock market called the Kospi. For most of the last decade, it went nowhere. Foreign investors had a nickname for it, the Korea discount. The idea that Korean companies were structurally cheap and always will be, until 2025, when the AI boom hit. The Kospi rose about 75%, its best year since 1999. People call it a once-in-a-generation run. Then 2026 started, and by the time I'm recording this video in early June, it's up roughly another 90% on top of that. The index blew through 7,000 points for the first time in its history, kept going past 8,000, then past 8,400. A market that did nothing for years more than doubled in a few months. To understand what happened, you need to picture where South Korea was at that time. In December 2024, the country was in total chaos. The president, Yoon Suk-yeol, had just gone on national television and declared martial law. Out of nowhere, in the middle of the night, the military showed up at the parliament building, lawmakers climbed up the fence consensus to get inside and vote it down. Within hours it was over, but the damage was real. Yoon was impeached. The country looked unstable for the first time in a generation, and foreign investors, they did what foreign investors always do when a developed country starts behaving like an emerging market. They left. The Korean stock market closed the year at 2,399 points, down nearly 10%. It was one of the worst performing major indexes in Asia. Pretty much every analyst on Wall Street had it in the avoid pile. That was 18 months ago. It changed fast. SK Hynix gained around 274% in 2025. Then in 2026, it added another 188% on top. Cumulatively, the stock is up roughly 900% in about a year. Samsung, the slower of the two, crossed a $1 trillion valuation, so did SK Hynix. Everyone was thrilled, but there is the part that gets lost in the celebration. A market that goes vertical because of two companies in one industry is a dangerous leverage bet. At Statrys, we deal with entrepreneurs moving money in and out of Asia constantly, and the smart ones don't see a boom and feel reassured. They see concentration and start asking what happened when it turns. Because here's the thing, the stock charts hide. While the Kospi was doubling, the actual Korean economy grew about 1% in 2025. The rest of the country is barely moving. So you have a nation that on paper just got extremely rich, and the more divided reality is taking shape. One that's starting to tear the country in two. If this is the kind of breakdown you want more of, that's the whole point of this channel. How Asian business actually works from the inside. If that sounds interesting to you, hit subscribe. Money this big doesn't stay on a screen. It lands on real people, and in Korea it created a brand new class almost overnight. SK Hynix has an agreement with its workers that ends 10% of the company's operating profit straight to the staff as a bonus. The average SK Hynix employee is looking at a bonus of around 700 million won. That's roughly $400,000 on top of the salary. Online, Koreans even gave them a nickname, Lord Hynix. In a country where most people are struggling, cheap engineers suddenly look like aristocracy. And then it got competitive in a weird way. Last April, tens of thousands of Samsung workers, by some counts around 40,000, rallied at the Pyeongtaek campus south of Seoul to ask for something similar. They threatened an 18-day strike that could have frozen AI chip shipments to the whole world. Think about the leverage in that room for a second. A single day of disruption at one of these plants will cost Samsung millions. It also moved global chip prices. It delays data centers on other continents. These workers knew it. That's why they won. Both companies are now competing for talent with compensation packages that would have sounded absurd just a few years ago. And for every Lord Hynix, there's another Korea that got none of this. While a cheap engineer pockets a $400,000 bonus, a nurse working long shifts in Seoul is looking at an apartment that costs around 14 times her annual salary, before tax, food, and living. That's roughly the math for a young professional in Seoul right now. The president of the country, Lee Jae-myung, has gone as far as calling Korea a real estate speculation republic and treating housing as an existential threat to the nation. And the despair shows up in the numbers that actually matter. Korea has the lowest birth rate ever recorded for any country, bottoming out around 0.75 children per woman. And in late 2025, the suicide rate among young Koreans hit its highest level in over a decade. On OECD's ranking of life satisfaction for young people, Korea sits near to the very bottom, 31st out of 38 countries. Now, on the business side, it's worse. In 2024 alone, more than 1 million Korean businesses shut their doors, the highest number since the country started keeping records in 1995. Restaurants, shops, family businesses, small operators, the ordinary economy closing in record numbers in the exact same time that two chip giants were minting overnight millionaires. How is a country this rich on paper and this miserable underneath? Economists call it a K-shaped economy. One line on the chart shoots up, the chip industry and everyone attached to it, and the other line slides down, everyone else. The two lines start from the same point and go in opposite directions, and they never reconnect. The overall GDP number that 1% growth would talk about, it shows those two lines average into one figure that describe nobody's actual life. In May, a top policy advisor to the president floated an idea on Facebook. If these AI chip profits are so enormous and they were built on decades of national investment, education, infrastructure, why shouldn't a slice of that windfall go back to every citizen? The moment politicians suggested redistribution part of the AI windfall, investors panicked. Within hours, the Korean stock market dropped as much as 5%, foreign investors heading for the exits at the mere hint that the government might tax the golden goose. The opposition party went straight for the throat, calling it communism, basically the government seizing what people earn. And all of this is landing right on top of local elections happening in early June, days from when I'm recording this. So the fight is raw and unresolved as I speak. Now, remember what I mentioned at the very start of this video. Go back to those factories, all packed into a small area. I want to be careful here because this is exactly the kind of things that gets turned into lazy fear-mongering, and I'm not interested in that. So let's be precise. North Korea has spent decades building one of the largest concentrations of artillery on the planet along that border. Among it is a rocket system, the KN-09, a 300mm launcher with a range of roughly 180 to 200 kilometers. Defense analysts at CISIS have noted in plain writing that this system can already reach Pyeongtaek and the major bases around it. The chips that feed the world's AI are sitting inside its range. You don't need a nuclear weapon for this. The uncomfortable reality is that a sustained conventional artillery barrage, the kind that has been theoretically possible for years, aimed at that cluster could destroy a meaningful share of the world's advanced memory supply. You have to understand, a modern fab is an incredibly delicate thing. The clean rooms, the equipment, the calibration, a single serious hit doesn't dent production. It erases a facility that takes years and tens of billions to rebuild. Now, the honest counterpoint, and I'd be lying if I skipped it. The probability of this actually happening is low. It's been low for 70 years. North Korea attacking the South means the end of North Korea, and the regime, for all its theater, has generally behaved like it wants to survive. Some analysts also argue the precision of this rocket system is overstated, that they're blunt instruments. All true? I'm not telling you to expect this next Tuesday. What I'm telling you is something more unsettling. The whole world has bet its AI future on the continued restraint of one of the most unpredictable regimes on Earth. And almost no one has put that bet into words. I know what you might think. You're not building chips, you're not trading the Korean markets, why should any of this land on your desk? You might not have connected the dots yet. But when Samsung and SK Hynix decided to throw almost everything at HBM, they pulled capacity away from the regular memory that goes into laptops, phones, servers. That's the components sitting inside half the things your business depends on. The big PC makers like Dell or Lenovo started warning customers that prices were going up 15 to 20%. And the bill is landing on a hardware startup in Berlin, a manufacturer in Vietnam, me at Statrys, and of course you, whatever you do. If you find this kind of story interesting, the stuff that's actually happening in Asia that nobody's covering in Western media, that's exactly what this channel is about. Hit subscribe if you want more of it. If you've ever felt that exposure in your own business, that sense that something far away decides your cost before you do, I'd like to hear about it. Drop it in the comments. See you in the next video.